position with the National Wild Turkey Federation and the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. And I'm going to kick off this presentation here with Rachel Ladd, who is from Iowa DNR, and Eddie Herndon, who is from Virginia. And today we're going to talk a little bit about some surveys that we've collected over the course of the past year where we all asked some of the same pre- and post-survey questions, and then we were able to compare those questions from program to program in our states. So this first slide just gives you an idea of how many surveys we collected over the course of the last year. Nebraska and Iowa started working on this at the same time, so our numbers are fairly similar, but Eddie joined us a little further down the line. So he doesn't have quite as many as we did in Nebraska and Iowa. And then we also got to work with the Pheasants Forever National R3 coordinator to evaluate some of their programs where they asked similar questions as well. So in Iowa and Nebraska, we had about 2,000 pre-surveys over the course of the last year. Iowa had a few more post-surveys than we did simply by the way that we all delivered our post-surveys was just different, so their method worked a little bit better than Nebraska's. And then Pheasants Forever had 172 post-surveys, and Virginia had approximately 68. So I wanted to dive into the details a little bit about how we were able to successfully collect over 2,000 pre-surveys in Nebraska and Kansas. And the way that we found to be successful in this was we worked with Calcemy, who we use to register a lot of our programs, to implement our pre-survey questions into the registration system. So we no longer had to worry about, sending out a survey link, giving out a paper survey at an event or something like that. People were simply able to answer pre-survey questions when they were registering for programs, which was really nice. So we had several standard questions, and you can see them all in this PowerPoint slide that we all asked. And there were a few complications with how we could ask questions to be able to, like we weren't able to say select your top two because we had to do drop-down menus and some things like that. But overall, we really enjoyed working with Calcemy to implement our pre-survey questions into our registration systems for our events, and it worked seamlessly. So our major takeaways from this were that making pre-survey questions mandatory is something that we highly recommend to everybody. It saved us a lot of headaches. If we can figure out how to automate our post-surveys in this next year, that will save us even more headaches, and hopefully we'll get more post-survey feedback. We need to figure out how we can the best collection tool for our surveys as well is another thing we need to figure out. Nebraska, Virginia, and Iowa, we all used a variety of different methods to collect pre- and post surveys over the course of the last year outside of Calcemy, and so we just need to get things streamlined a little bit and figure out the best tool for our post survey primarily, because we know that Calcemy works really well for collecting our pre-surveys. So what we want to do is show you some of the information that we found out over the course of the last year and how our programs compare from state to state, and how some of our questions compare from state to state to state. And are we getting similar answers? Are our demographics different across the country? And so hopefully some of these survey questions are able to show you guys that. So this slide that we've got pulled up right here is addressing our question that related to the top barriers that someone has to participating in hunting. And at the bottom of the graph, you can see our top answers. So in Iowa, Nebraska, and Virginia, we saw similar responses. And one thing we quickly learned as we were analyzing our results in this was that we needed to eliminate the other option. I'm sure you've all run into this before, but in a lot of our surveys, other was marked, and we have no idea what they meant by other. So moving into 2019, we've eliminated the option of other so that we can get a more concise view of what people's barriers to hunting and shooting sports are. So overwhelmingly amongst our 3 states, we learned that the top 3 barriers are people have a lack of knowledge and skills, they don't have enough access to convenient and quality land or water, and they don't know where to go. And it was really fun to see that we had similar responses across 3 states. So we know that people have the same struggles no matter if you're from Nebraska, Iowa, or Virginia. So the next question that we looked at comparing was how often people hunt. We had a lot of adjustments with this question throughout the year when it came to the number of days we wanted to provide in our survey options. The ones that you see here actually aren't what we settled on in the end. We have different options that we're going to be using in 2019, but in 2018 this is what we used. So we learned that with all of our outdoor skills programs that we are offering in our 3 states, most of the people attending our programs had never participated in hunting before, or they hunted 1 to 5 days a year, so they weren't going out a lot. And we were really excited amongst our 3 states to see this response, because that means we're getting the right butts in seats for our programs, which I know is really important to everybody on this webinar, getting the right people in the right place at the right time. And so for us, we were really excited to see that our participants were new to the hunting world, and that meant we were advertising in the right place. The next question that we compared was how did people, what confidence level did people have when they were going hunting and shooting? And this was a post-survey question that we were comparing. And overwhelmingly, we were really excited again that when people left our programs, they were feeling comfortable to go out into the field either with someone or on their own, which is the idea for a lot of our outdoor skill programs, to equip people with skills that will create future hunters, shooters, and anglers. And our post-survey was showing that after our programs, people were able to go out into the field at one level or another. So as we talked more about comparing questions from state to state to state, we took away some different things. So the first one was dealing with our response options, and I already mentioned this. We learned that we need to take out the other field and either allow for an open text box so people can tell us what other was, or take it out altogether. And our changes for 2019, we pretty much took it out altogether. We learned that the #1 barrier for people to participate in hunting through our common survey questions was lack of knowledge and skills. And we learned that our new hunters were able to distinguish answers between our new hunters and our current hunters and shooters, that our new hunters really weren't that concerned about access when it came to hunting participation, but more so they were concerned about social support, who was going to help them down the road. And so these things were really nice takeaways as we look into planning our events for this next year. Our data proves that we are making hunters, but we know that we need to think more about how we're going to move these people through the outdoor recreation adoption model. Now that we have this information, what can we do to continue to move them through this chain so that we're not losing them and they're not just coming to a one-time event? And that's something that we want to continue to work on. So the other thing we did was not only compare our survey questions collectively from state to state, but we also compared our questions by event type, because the 3 states that worked together here had similar events that we were able to compare by. So the first event I'm going to run by is Becoming an Outdoors Woman. I'm not sure how many of your states have a Becoming an Outdoors Woman program, but fortunately for Iowa and Nebraska, Rachel and I were able to compare our answers between our 2 programs. So I'm just going to touch on some highlights between them. So if you're not familiar with Becoming an Outdoor Woman, this is a program that's supposed to introduce women to outdoor skills, hunting, shooting, angling, outdoor cooking, things along those lines. But we are specifically looking in these survey questions at their participation in hunting and shooting sports. And so we were looking at the top barriers to women who attend Becoming an Outdoors Woman programs to hunting. And again, we saw a lot of similarities, which is pretty cool, but we see that new women being introduced to hunting and shooting sports struggle with the lack of knowledge and skill and lack of comfort with the firearm. And the benefit to being able to know these answers is how we can adjust our BOW programs down the road. What other classes do we have? What do we need to add? What resources do they need? And so this survey is really helping us here in Nebraska as we plan for our BOW program here in 2019. The other common question we looked at were reasons that people attend our programs. I think we all wonder, why are they here? You know, are they forced to be here? Do they want to be here? And so one of the questions we ask are the reasons that people are attending our workshops. So the top 4 reasons that people are attending our BOW workshops between Nebraska and Iowa are on this slide here, and it was because their family and friends are participating. They wanted to feel more connected with nature. They wanted to learn a new life skill, and they want to build confidence in existing skills. And knowing what BOW is, why we host these workshops, these 4 skills or the 4 reasons they want to attend our workshops fit right into the mission of becoming an outdoor woman. So even more importantly, one of the things we want to talk about after our Becoming an Outdoor Woman workshops was looking at, prior to becoming an outdoor woman, how often were our participants heading out into the field to go hunting, and what were their confidence levels after attending BOW and learning these new skills and learning about new resources. So prior to attending BOW, most of our participants had never hunted before or had not hunted in the last 12 months. And again, that was the demographic we were trying to reach, so that was good. And then we were seeing when the ladies left BOW that their confidence levels had increased. They were excited to go out into the field with help or on their own. And so we can measure the before and after between our pre and post surveys, which is also really important as you're thinking about jumping on board of this survey bandwagon and how important it is to make sure that we're measuring before and afters so we can look at impacts of our program. So to wrap up Becoming an Outdoors Woman, essentially we've learned that Becoming an Outdoors Woman participants have different needs than our hunter education participants, which we're going to cover here down the road. So for example, Becoming an Outdoors Woman ladies want to be more comfortable with a firearm, and they're more concerned about where they're going to go versus the quality of the land when they get there. These surveys helped us learn that our audience, this particular BOW audience, has a lot of potential for growth. They're not hunters and shooters when they come to us, but they are leaving with the hunting and shooting sports interest, which is the point of our 3. That's the point of moving people through the outdoor recreation adoption model. And so we're really excited to see our surveys help us figure these things out and make plans for our programs into the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Eddie to talk about some of our other programs that we surveyed.
Thanks, Micaela. Hi, everyone. This is Eddie Herndon from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. And what I'm going to talk about here is hunter education and learn to hunt workshops, 2 entry points for a lot of new hunters, especially hunter education where it is required that any new hunter take. It was really interesting to see some of the data that was coming from this entry point, which was hunter ed. So in Virginia, we have about 11,000 students that go through hunter ed every year. About 3,000 of those are in the classroom. So this was some of the top responses to hunter education courses. As you can see, lack of knowledge, like Micaela was mentioning, was a high selection for barriers to participation, as well as not enough access, not knowing where to go. So oftentimes we know this audience is interested in hunting, but we don't really know, are they actually going to participate? So this is going to give us some good information on what are those barriers and what can we do to support them in their process of becoming a hunter. The next one here was what contributed to their interest in attending. So why were they taking that course? Top 3 answers there. You can see family and friends participating, harvesting local sustainable foods, and learning a new life skill. What's kind of important here is that everything kind of relates to the social aspect of hunting. And it was good to see that harvesting foods was also a top selection, which is something that we've all talked about in the R3 community for a long time now. But it was nice to see that confirmed through some of these surveys that it is a big interest for people going through hunter ed. So like I said, the big takeaway for hunter ed was that it all kind of relates back to that social aspect. Access, lack of access is a common barrier. But one of the things we thought was maybe that question of convenient quality lands is maybe too broad. So in our for 2019, we've actually taken out the the convenient aspect, and the question reads just access to quality hunting land. So that's something we need to tease out a little more and get some more information on. So what type, when people list access as a barrier, what does that actually mean? Is it the quality of the land, or is it their location and all that stuff? So Learn to Hunt workshops. In Virginia, we didn't have quite as many as Iowa and Nebraska. But one of the interesting post-survey questions we were asking is about gear purchases. We wanted people to let us know, after taking this course, are you more likely to, what equipment are you more likely to purchase, what kind of gear? Here are the top responses to that: firearms, outdoor clothing, hunting blind, game processing equipment. And really the goal with this is to collect data that maybe we can potentially use in a conversation with an industry representative, stakeholder group, company, and maybe, work on building a relationship there where we can say that, hey, this person takes a Learn to Hunt workshop. They're more likely to buy hunting calls. How can you help us execute this workshop or build a better relationship? So I think this will be good data for us to have in the future when we want to talk to industry stakeholders throughout the country and in our specific states. So reasons to attend Learn to Hunt workshops. This was in the part of the pre-survey here. And it was pretty interesting to see that, again, local sustainable foods was a very popular selection. Learning a new life skill and building confidence in skills. So people that go to these workshops really, they have a clear interest in hunting, but they need that skills, and that's really why they're there, is to learn. And then before and after, so in Virginia, we weren't able to do as many post surveys as I would like, since I joined on later. But this was interesting to see, asking people what is their likelihood to hunt before and after. And proportionally, it was clear that people that go into a Learn to Hunt, they clearly have a high interest and likelihood that they're probably going to hunt since they're attending the class. But all three states saw a pretty good increase in the very likely to hunt from pre and post. But overall, people that are coming to these workshops are pretty likely or somewhat likely to hunt because they wouldn't be there otherwise. But it was good to see an increase after. Lets us know that we are doing something right. So again, just the major takeaways there. Intention to hunt really starts pretty high, and then we show a good increase afterwards. And people are coming to perfect and learn new skills, and harvesting local and sustainable foods was definitely a high choice for us. So that was the Learn to Hunt and the Hunter Ed courses, and now I'll hand it over to Rachel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rachel with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources, and as the slide says, we're going to talk about Pheasants Forever. So Micaela mentioned that when we started this, Iowa, Nebraska, and Pheasants Forever started. Unfortunately, representative from Pheasants Forever isn't here anymore, so I'm going to do my best to kind of walk through this section. So Pheasants Forever was working on their mentor programming, so their Train the Trainer workshops. So in their data here, they started their surveys, and they worked in 9 different states holding the surveys, and for their pre-surveys they did 157 participants took them, and then their post-surveys 172. So they were all done in paper at the workshop, and they had a much higher percentage of response rate because of the fact that they were handed out in that class and then all turned in before. Can you hear me better, Bruce? Okay, perfect. So their participation or their response rate went up due to the fact that they were collecting paper surveys at their workshops. So we posed a couple different questions that we wanted to show you today. So they were asked which of the following contributed to their interest in attending the workshop. So an overwhelming percent, 26% were interested in sharing knowledge, passion, and others, which absolutely makes sense. I think everyone on this phone call could probably agree that they know this group well. They might even self-identify themselves as a person that's looking to take somebody else out. You're looking to gain mentor skills. So the other big takeaways on this one were that people were interested in maintaining healthy wildlife populations. This really didn't come up when we looked at hunter ed or learn to hunt data. It was pretty low for response rates, but here, once we're talking to mentors and those that are established hunters, it's finally coming out. And then the other two big ones were harvesting the sustainable foods again, and then doing it because their friends and family participate. And then the question was asked, how often do you go hunting? I'd say it's no surprise here that folks that are in a Learn to Mentor program or a Train the Trainer program, they hunt, right? I guess to me it was a little surprising that we had 6 people, or about 4% of the respondents, saying that they had never hunted. But I'm assuming that they're either learning to be a mentor for on-range shooting sports programming or for fishing programs. So they're just looking for that mentoring skill, but going to use it in a different capacity than specifically to hunting. The next thing we looked at were what are the 2 most significant barriers you have to participating in hunting? So Micaela had mentioned our discovery of other and how it really very quickly didn't help us actually gain any knowledgeable information. So 18% of people chose other. Luckily, Courtney, with the in-person data collection, was able to have people, if they did choose other, they were able to actually put it right in their response. So we do have a lot of that information. Additionally, we realized that, Matt had originally kind of said that we need to have that open text field there so that we really can collect all possibilities, and then once we get the all possibilities kind of narrowed down, then we can go back to that limited drop-down choice. So the other big ones on here was not enough access to that convenient quality hunting land. Again, we felt that there were 2 options there. Are you talking about convenient land, or are you talking about quality land? And it is all subject to perspective and your opinion. As a new hunter, walk-on might be convenient and quality, but as to an established hunter, if I'm not limiting out on birds, that might be the quality land I'm looking for. So it's all kind of subject to people's perspectives and opinions. And then the other one was just not knowing where to go. So our major takeaways, again, these surveys were very different than the answers we were getting to the novice hunter group that were going to the hunter education and the Learn to Hunt. They also were seeming to understand a little bit more than the average hunter the role of conservation, and then they were showing more barriers of access versus the skill. So I know Courtney used these takeaways to really tweak how she was giving her mentor training. So when asked, what are you going to do after completing the workshop? We have about 29% of people saying that they're going to participate in a similar program. 27% of people said they were going to participate in this subject on my own, and then about 20% that said that they were going to find more information. So as we look into that, it looks like people, the top two answers, they were going to somehow continue mentoring, but there's nothing that really shows us that after taking the mentor training class that then they are going to physically go mentoring. So our big takeaway from that question was really realizing that we need to really beef up that streamlined path for a mentor. So it's created more questions, I think, probably than we have answers for, but it's gotten conversation started on how does a mentor continue their process. So to kind of sum things up and then be happy to take questions and all that good stuff. So Micaela and Eddie both alluded to the fact that the responses really varied depending if people are coming to the entry-level workshop, whether they're going to a BOW program or they're coming to a train-the-trainer program. In our original versions of this survey, we had questions about logistics, wondering about food, instructors, and facilities. Now, while nationwide, this data might be hard to compare, we very quickly realized. But as somebody that's doing programming on a local level, I personally feel that this is incredibly useful data. It helps us really identify if someone's saying that the program was terrible. It really helps us identify, was it because of something the coordinator or the program facilitator could have fixed, like was the food terrible, the length of the program, or was it the facility itself, or was it because it was raining the whole weekend and the participant failed to bring, a raincoat, so they were just straight miserable. You could have had the best program, but it wasn't going to go over well. Additionally, the best tools for delivering surveys. We're still learning. We started this about a year ago, just realizing that we had been challenged a couple of years ago by Mr. Dunphy, and finally realized that we were at the point where we could try something. None of this is perfect. It's a living, breathing document. We tweak as we go, but what is the best way to deliver surveys? Micaela and I used Calcami because that's where our students are registering for different programming. Other folks have tried Survey Gizmo and Survey Monkey. We had Survey Monkey for a while, but with their affiliation to the Humane Society, I had lots of folks saying that they'd love to give us feedback, but wouldn't do it on that platform. So we ended up going to Survey Gizmo. And then Courtney did hand surveys and then data entered it. So it kind of depended on what each organization could handle as far as getting the information in. And then we've talked a lot about incentivizing survey responses. Is it worth working with local nonprofits to give out gift cards? Are we skewing our data? Are we increasing rates? Just trying to come to a conclusion on that, and I'd say we're still working on that without a question. And then at the end of the day, is there a baseline for response rates? I've been asked this a number of times, and at this point, it's so new. The quick answer is no, but it's something that the R3 community, I think, in general is working on, and with help from others, we certainly could get there. With only about 5,000 surveys being concluded, it's hard to really get there yet. So our last little plug, and then I'll open it up to questions. If you're interested in jumping on and representing a state, we'd love to talk with you. We're going to do a group conference call on the 29th. Micaela's email is there, so please reach out to her to get the conference call information so that we can try and get more folks on. I know that we have our surveys out on the community and be happy to send them to you if you wanted to implement them yourself, or if you have questions and want further information, we'd be happy to work on that too. So with that, Kristen, I'm going to turn it back to you. And
awesome. Thanks, guys. That was a lot of really good information. Hopefully everybody got a little more comfortable with the evaluation techniques and your methods for doing so. So we do have a couple of questions that I will read off to you and prompt, and any of you who feel comfortable to answer these can go ahead and do so. But our first question was regarding the access to quality land. Would the term quality not be very subjective, and why would you include quality and not just ask about land access?
Do you want to take, I can take this if you guys want.
sure.
I think that the point of our pre and post surveys was to narrow down, several questions that we could all ask, and some of them are a little bit generic. I think that there's definitely value in the future asking questions that clarify things about the quality of land, or the convenience of land. But I think in this particular survey effort that we did, we were just trying to ask some generic questions that we could all get on board with, and then we can add on more clarifying questions as we go. This was just a really baseline survey to help us get started from doing nothing to doing something. And so I think those are good ideas to clarify about, quality and convenience, but it's just not something we've done at this point with additional survey questions. I know that probably doesn't really answer your question, but it's kind of where we're at in the process.
And to add on to that, we wanted to try and keep it under 10 questions on that pre-survey. We didn't want anything that was going to hinder registration. So kind of going along with what Micaela said, we probably came up with 40 questions that we wanted to ask people, but we really tried to narrow it down. So that's kind of what we ended on so that we could get started.
Great, and I think that also lends to kind of the future of evaluation and maybe getting more in depth with your particular state or region too, depending on what kind of program you're running and that kind of thing. So in the future, we do hope to have kind of a follow-up to this with how to tailor these surveys to your program.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note too, that these are just our standard questions that Rachel, Eddie, I, Courtney, we all had other questions that we asked in our surveys, but these are the standard questions that we wanted to help people, just get started with something. So in Nebraska, I'll tailor our surveys with, asking these questions and then other things that are pertinent to the program.
Yes, awesome. So our second question is, when comparing pre- and post-surveys, did you match the same respondents up and exclude from the analysis participants who completed a pre-survey but not a post-survey? This would seem necessary to ensure a valid comparison of the same people. So for the people who completed a pre-survey but maybe not a post, was there anything done with the pre-surveys?
I can speak for, sorry.
Go ahead, Eddie.
Yeah, in Virginia, since we didn't have a ton of workshops last year, I was able to match pre and post and see people that did both and keep that data. But I think it's difficult when you're talking a lot of data, especially with what we get from Calcami. It's not as easy. It's difficult to sometimes get that and keep it together when you're just one person looking at it. But that is something that we need to keep in mind moving forward, and something I'll probably work together with our human dimension specialist here in Virginia in 2019 is to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to make sure the data is correct.
Great. We'll move on to our next question. Regarding the likeliness to hunt after the Learn to Hunt program, I think I noticed that the very likely number went down between pre and post surveys. Can you address this or tell me I didn't read the numbers correctly? And that may be what our previous question was referring to about pre and post surveys not maybe being completely comparable just because of the non-response bias in the post surveys.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Kristen. I think that some of our we didn't necessarily have the same number of pre-surveys versus post-surveys. And so overall, you know, we see that people are more likely to go hunting than not after our programs, which I think is what we're looking at right now. But you're exactly right, Kristen, that, you know, we could have more pre or more post, which can skew the numbers a little bit.
Sure. Awesome. Next question hopefully is an easy one. Can we get access to the deck and or the survey results? And Micaela, is that something that they should just email you for, or are you not distributing those?
I think each state is different. In Nebraska, I have shared some of our survey results by program, but I've only done it for ones where I feel like we actually have a substantial number of surveys to work on. So I'm trying to think. So like the other day, a state reached out to me and wanted to know more about our survey results for Becoming an Outdoor Family programs because they were thinking about starting Becoming an Outdoor Family program, but I only had like 5 or 6 surveys pre or post, so I didn't feel like that was enough to share. But pending what you want, I think that, I mean, in Nebraska, we're okay with sharing results. I think Iowa and Virginia and Pheasants Forever, I think we all, you know, have different protocol.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an important thing to realize is that all states have kind of different ways that they handle data and who's in control of that, so it probably does just depend on the state. Our next question is about timing of those surveys. So you may have already said this, but when did you administer your post surveys to participants? Was it directly after the workshop ended or sometime after maybe they went home?
Well, I can handle this one.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
It really depended on the state. So in a perfect world, I'd like to say that I got it out within a week or 2 of the event. But the reality is it was usually about a month after they completed the program, whereas like with the Learn to Hunt, it was at the end of the event. And then with the Pheasants Forever data, I can tell you for sure that it was at the close of the program.
Yeah, and I was just going to say it depended on the workshop. I did last year. I started doing some paper post, but I just found the data entry was way too time consuming. So for 2019, I'm just sticking to a digital post survey that I'm sending through Google Forms, and I usually like to send those that next week after the event takes place.
Yeah, in Nebraska, I did it sometime between, like, that next day or, you know, within the week. It kind of just depended when the event was held and what else I had going on. But all my post surveys were electronic, so.
Sure, and there's definitely benefits to doing that electronically. I know in Illinois we used to do post surveys right after the event ended while everybody was still there, which, you know, gave us a 100% response rate, but there's a lot more time involved in manually entering all of those responses. So I think that's one thing that we're still trying to figure out the BMPs on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a maybe suggestion from someone about the graphs. They're saying that it might be easier to grasp if you represented everything in percentages rather than raw numbers. So I'm not sure if y'all have considered that, but that might be something to look at for future representation. And then we'll take this one last question. Do you have any data supporting a decrease in registration as the pre-survey length increases? for a free workshop. I don't have a problem asking for more data at the registration. Not sure if we're pushing people away. So have you guys noticed maybe a decrease in participation based on the length of the surveys?
Iowa's been doing some form of a pre-survey for a few years now, and no is the quick answer for you. We haven't, but we've always kept it about 5 to 10 questions on that pre-survey, just so that it wasn't a total barrier, because at the end of the day, we want them in the class taking the program. So.
Yeah, same for Nebraska. And Courtney with Pheasants Forever and I, we were like the original instigators of this, and I can't remember now with Courtney being gone, but she had done quite a bit of research on the length of the survey and how that affects registration, and she was really adamant that it needed to be 10 questions or less. So I'm sure there's a reason she was really adamant, but I can't remember. It feels like so long ago. I can't remember off the top of my head now if there was any formal research that she had presented when we started this.
Yeah, in Virginia, we haven't seen any decrease in that. I think when I talked to Mitch from Calcomai, he said that I believe he said that they don't see any big drops in length, but I would never want the registration to be a bear for people, and I think under 10 and under is a good overall length for people to handle.
Yeah, I agree, and maybe that is another thing that we need to look at in the future of evaluation for just what is the optimal number of questions. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I have included the link to a survey, surprise, for this webinar in the chat. So if you guys don't mind filling out the survey, that helps me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what we can do better, and helps give me ideas for future webinars. So if you don't mind taking a couple minutes filling that out, that would be massively helpful to me. And thank you to our speakers for all of your work on this, your willingness to share with us, and the continuation of these efforts going forward.